Hey everybody, Dave here at Blue Bears Games, and this week our main video for the week is going to be a Blues Budget Brews. It is my budget commander series where the deck is actually for sale, so just realize that when I go over this deck that this whole deck is for sale. If you want to know more about that, I'll tell you about that later. But today, who is the deck about? So I don't know how to say this commander's name, and not because I don't know how to read, and not because of any other reason other than I don't know how Wizards of the Coast actually wanted you to read the name. So I'll explain. It could be Maja because of Baja being B-A-J-A, and this is M-A-J-A. It could be Maja, like Maja Pain. So I don't know what it's going to be called. So I'm going to say Maja is the name of this one, and if I'm wrong, somebody let me know. I don't know how they intended for it to be read, but it's Maja Bretagard Protector. Maja is a 2 white, 1 green, and 2 colorless commander, so 5 converted mana cost. It is a 2/3 humanid warrior, and its abilities are statically, they give all other creatures you control +1/+1, so it itself is an anthem from the beginning. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield, or basically landfall, under your control, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So, if you can't tell where this is going, buckle up. So I'm going to go over the deck. I always go through lands first, so let's just get started and we'll go from there. So we are in green and white, or Selesnya colors, so I'll just rifle off the card names. You should be able to read them as I go, and if you can't, just pause the video for a second. Alright, so the Temple for green-white, and then the dual lands that come along with green-white that come into play tapped for the most part. The Sanctuary, so you can bring it into play and then return a land, and it taps for both colors. The Guild Gate, Tranquil Expanse, Blossoming Sands, it also gives you a life. Blighted Woodland, you'll notice that there are a lot of the theme here is going to be finding ways to put land into play, so this is one of the ways. Blighted Step gives you life for each creature you control. You should have a very vast amount of tokens going, if you play it correctly. Crozen Verge, so it comes into play tapped, you add a colorless, and then you can pay 2, tap it, and then search your library for a forest and a plains card and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So double landfall. So obviously you can't put it into play and then tap it, so you can't get triple, but you can get double from just that. But you can also play your land for the turn as well, so you can get triple landfall, but just not off the verge. Obviously, Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds, because again, they double landfall. And Mirrored Landscape for more landfall fun. And then the rest is just basic plains and forests, nothing really special there. If you want to know the actual amounts, remember I always put the link to the actual deck list for the video in the description, so if you want to check out the exact numbers of plains and forests, you can go ahead and do so. Same thing with if you want to purchase it, you can just look at the deck list there. So ramp, this section, pretty sizable. Why? Because this is essentially a landfall deck. So we're going to go over everything. So Reclaim the Wastes, not exactly good for landfall because it puts them into your hand, but at least you can go grab 2 so you can have additional landfall abilities. Colony Heart Expedition, so it does have a landfall ability as well. So whenever you put a land into play, or whenever a land enters, put a counter on it, and then you can remove 3 counters, sacrifice it, and then go search for 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So again, more landfall. Thunderous Migration, or Thunder Herd Migration. Realize that I don't care about the additional 1 to pay, just because it's not going to have dinosaurs in it. It's just for a landfall ability. Cultivate, one of the better ones. Search for Tomorrow, suspend, so you can do it for 1, suspend it with 2 counters on it. On the 3rd turn, you'll go get a land. Field Trip. On this one, it's actually interesting. You can learn. So, depending on the rules of how your group plays, if it matters for the learn part, you can either discard a card and draw a card, or what have you. Or you can actually go get something from outside the game that's a learned card or a lesson. I don't know how your group plays, but, it's in there for that. Map the Wastes, actually kind of cool. It goes and gets a land and bolsters, which means it gives a +1/+1 counter or something. Most likely you're going to give it to Maja. Natural Connection. Beneath the Sands, because it cycles. Even though you want the landfall, sometimes you just want the card. Far Wanderings, because with the threshold, you can go get 3 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped. That's triple the landfall. And this is Pilgrimage, so you can go get 2, and then if you have Spell Mastery, which means if you have 2 instants of sorceries in your graveyard, you can go and get up to 3 basic forests. Growth Spasm, so you can put a 0/1 into play. So you go get a land, put it on the battlefield, you put a 0/1 into play, and a 1/1 if you have Maja out. Kodama's Reach lets you go get one, put it into play, and put it in your hand. Deep Reconnaissance lets you flash it back after you put it into play. Harvest Season, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those onto the battlefield tapped. So with as many creatures as you're going to have, you may be able to go get every basic land you have in the deck in one shot. And this is Expedition, so you can evoke it, so you can tap creatures that you control to pay for it. So search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It's 5, but you can actually, if you play it later in the game and you have a lot of tokens out, you can basically play it for 1. So, and then the odd choice here is that I put a creature in this section just because I'm going into the creatures next, but Burnished Tard actually works as a landfall or a, land searching ramp card. So it's a 3 to cast 2/2 that when you pay 3 and sacrifice it, you can go to search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So in essence, this is a walking or a living ramp. So I wanted to put that in the ramp section. So those are the cards that you're going to use, and as you can see, that's a lot. So this deck is basically a landfall deck. I didn't want to make it like every other landfall deck I make. I've very recently been very into the Scoot Swarm, Landfall, like, especially in blue-green, I've been really into it just because they're my 2 favorite colors to combine now. And the Scoot Swarm thing is just fascinating and fabulous. Completely broken, should never have been made. But I wanted this to be a little different. So here are the creatures. Now the creatures here are going to be a little weird. So I have a couple ways I could have gone with this deck. The first one, as you can see, is Soul Warden. And the reason why is I have a lot of creatures in here that can gain you life for having creatures come into play, because as you can tell, you can put a land into play. With Maja out, you put a creature into play and then you gain a life. So that's a lot of triggers that happen. With the amount of creatures that are going to come into play, I wanted to play on a theory of not just swarming, but possibly life gain as well. So I'll go over it and we'll go from there. So Soul Warden, the one that casts 1/1, the queen. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, gain a life. Anointer Priest, whenever a token enters the battlefield, you gain a life. As you can see with Maja, that works. Same thing with the Impassioned Orator. Same thing as Soul Warden, only Soul Warden doesn't matter if it's under your control. Impassioned Orator does. Same thing with Daxos, so whenever another creature you control either enters the battlefield or dies, you gain a life. Pilgrim of the Ages, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic plains. Reveal it, put it in your hand, so you can go and get land fixing. The problem with this being a land fixer is it's already white, so you're not really fixing much. And then when Pilgrim Ages, for 6, you can return Pilgrim of the Ages from your graveyard to your hand. Now, why that's important and why this is in the deck. So, your whole purpose here is to be able to go get lands and put them into play, or to put them into play some other way. This goes in searches form. It's a continual searcher, even if it's just for planes. So, Midnight Guard, because there is a combo in here. We're making tokens and tokens and tokens, so this is the first half of a combo. If you already know what it is, don't spoil it for anybody else, but it's the first half. I'm actually going to put that aside and talk about that later. Core Celebrant, again, whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. And it's a 1/4, so it has a big ass. Gold Knight Commander, so Gold Knight Commander says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So if you're putting a major amount of... So if you play something, a creature that creates a token, so both of them create +1/+1 for each other creature. So your creatures can get rather large, rather fast for a swarm of tokens. So this is where this deck literally goes wide. Lots of 1/1s that get bigger, swarm in for the win. Healer of the Pride, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 2 life. Now, again, same thing as Soul Warden. So whenever a creature enters, you gain 2 life instead of 1. Emiria Angel has the landfall ability. Whenever a land enters battlefield under your control, you may create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So imagine with Maja out, you play Emiria Angel, and then you play a land. You get 2 tokens that are now getting both +1/+1. One will be flying, beneficial to you. It's also a 3/3 flyer on its own. Gate Creeper Vine goes and gets you a basic land or a gate card, and it just sits there early turn so you can stop 1/1s from attacking you. People like to do that. Llanowar Scout, 2 to cast 1/3, and then it says you can tap it to put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So here's where that gets a little interesting. There are ways, and I have stuff in here that will help, help make this go further than just putting a land into play. Remember, you have that bounce land that I had in the land section. You can put it into play and then bounce it back to your hand, and every turn you can do that, so you get a continual landfall effect. That's what that's for. Frontier Guide searches your library for a basic land card and puts it onto the battlefield tapped. So again, more searching for land. Fertilid lets you remove counters to put a land onto the battlefield tapped as well. Yavimaya Elder, great. Back in the day, this was king of card advantage. So when Yavimaya Elder dies, you may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, for them, put them into your hand, and then it itself has a sacrifice, and you draw a card ability. So it used to put 3 cards into your hand. And then, interesting, I guess this is what I would call my extremely budget Craterhoof game ender. So on a budget, you obviously have to fill holes for things that are game ending. So Craterhoof Behemoth does end games. So can Endrace Forerunners if you have enough creatures in play. So it has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. It costs roughly the same as Craterhoof, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. It's a 7/7 itself, so it automatically attacks when it comes into play. And then when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So that really makes things big, really makes them put damage through, and it can end the game. Selesnya Guildmage, 2 to cast 2/2 that creates a token. You want more tokens on the battlefield just because of your Anthem effect, and then it gives creatures +1/+1. So Vitu-Ghazi Guildmage, same thing. It creates tokens, and then it populates, so you can copy or create a token of a token you already have. Marasa Root Grazer is a 2 to cast 2/3, so that's good right there. It's got Vigilance, so it's got 2 power, 3 toughness for 2, and a great ability for a combat deck. And then tap it, you may put a basic land card from your hand onto the battlefield, or you can return the basic land you control to its owner's hand, creating more landfall effects. And then Wayfaring Temple, kind of in there just because if you have enough creatures, it himself can be a threat on the board. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, and then whenever you deal damage to somebody, a player specifically, you can populate, making him bigger. So those are the creatures that I have chosen for the budget version. Again, I will go over some upgrades in a moment. Utility defensive cards. Green and white are literally the kings of being able to destroy just about anything on the board. They cover almost every area of Magic. I don't think that they have any planeswalker removals per se, other than creatures. But they remove almost everything else. If I'm remembering correctly, I think everything else is covered. So we go with Wilt, because if you don't need the artifact or enchantment destruction, you can cycle it away for another card. Return to Nature, obviously, because you have choices here if you need to remove something from the graveyard. Broken Bond lets you put a land from your hand into play after you destroy an artifact or enchantment, so that's great for a landfall ability. Obviously, Disenchant, the original, the OG. Revoke Existence in case there's something that you need to remove that's troublesome. Sundering Growth, because you get to populate when you do it. Broken Wings, because one of your Banes may be flying creatures, so now your choices are to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying. Same thing with Crushing Canopy, so it can destroy an enchantment or something with flying. I've recently noticed that's one of the weaknesses that green has, where I needed to start adding that into a lot of my decks. Crushing Vines, again, destroys a creature with flying or an artifact. Angelic Purge just exiles an artifact, a creature, or an enchantment, but you have to sacrifice something. Ooh, boo-hoo. You're making tokens. And then Calming Verse. So this is one of my little techie things I like to add to some of my decks. So it destroys all enchantments that you don't control. So right off the bat, that's great, because that means that you get to keep your stuff. The downside is then you Then if you control no untapped lands, destroy all enchantments you control. So you have to tap all your lands to do this and make sure that you get all your opponent's stuff only. So hopefully you've done that anyway by casting a lot of stuff, but if not, it's just a wasted turn. But nothing too fancy there. Just a lot of removal. Not a lot of creature removal just because that's in the upgrade section. But alright. Now we're going to go into another section of utility where it's the enchantments that, or it's enchantments mostly, but it's going to be token creation and things that help that. So Retreat to Kazandu is the first one. It's a landfall ability, so you get to choose whenever you play land to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or gain 2 life. So that helps both aspects of this deck, where you're trying to gain life and where you're putting, you're making your creatures bigger. The other half of the infinite combo I was talking about, if you don't know about this yet, is Midnight Guard and Presence of Gond. So it's pretty simple. You enchant Midnight Guard with Presence of Gond, tap it to create a 1/1, untap it because its ability says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, untap Midnight Guard. And you can see where that's going. That's infinite tokens to come into play. So there's infinite enters the battlefield abilities. There's infinite, if you have certain things out, infinite life gain. That you can do whatever you want. The Midnight Commander or whatever. What the hell is the name? Sorry, don't mean to take up too much time here, but Gold Knight Commander. So infinite, enter the battlefield, give +1/+1 until end of turns. Lots of things there. So that's what the combo is. It's just an infinite little combo to add in to make the deck a little more powerful. Zendikar Royal is one of my favorite cards that I started using recently, especially in a landfall deck. So it now reads landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. Put a 2/2 green elemental creature token onto the battlefield or create. So Griffinary. So all that life gain has to do something for you. It's not just going to sit there and gain you life. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, create a 2/2 white griffin creature token with flying. That's why the life gain is in here, so that this enchantment, and there's more, can shine. So there's Griffinary. Intangible Virtue gives all your creature tokens +1/+1 in Vigilance, so that you can actually sit back and also defend. The other thing, Answered Prayers. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. That's all that this is for. If Answered Prayers isn't a creature, it becomes a 3/3 angel creature token with flying. You don't have to do it. You don't have to worry about that much. Yes, it'll do that, but the point of this is to gain you life. Angelic Accord, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 4 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. This is where defense for flying will come in. So the life gain is in here so that these can activate. It also helps keep you alive, but this is for creating bigger tokens. So remember, with Maja out, this 4/4 is a 5/5. So you gain 4 life off of whatever, and then you create a 5/5 flyer. So Felidar Retreat, another landfall ability enchantment. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can create a 2/2 beast or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And those creatures gain vigilance until the end of turn. So now you can make your creatures permanently get bigger. And they gain vigilance, but only the vigilance is until end of turn. And then Retreat to Emeria. So another landfall enchantment. So whenever land comes into play, creatures you control can either get +1/+1, or you can create a 1/1 core ally creature token. So token creation, a little bit of life gain, a little bit of everything actually. So those are the enchantments. Those are the utility enchantments that I've chosen. Now, green and white has a huge disadvantage when it comes to some things. It doesn't have blue, so card draw is a big, a big problem. So I've tried to solve that as much as I could because of the green section. So Seer Sundial is the first thing. Landfall ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2, and then if you do, draw a card. So that's the first way. Green has these quasi-draw cards that I like to start using recently. Adventurous Impulse, so it looks at its top 3 cards, and you can reveal a creature or land from among them, put it into your hand, so it doesn't get you everything you want, but for a deck where it's literally creatures and lands, it'll go get you what you need. Same thing with Track Down, so this one scries 3, and then reveal a top card of your library, and if it's a creature or land, you draw it. Otherwise, if it's a creature or land, draw it. Okay, yeah. Seek the Wild, same thing. So look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest back on the bottom of your library. Camaraderie, same thing here with drawing cards. So it's 1 white, 1 green, 4 of any. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures you control. And then creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. You may be able to draw most of your deck depending on how the game's going with that card. So lots of card draw, not a lot of card draw, but enough. And then the last 2 cards that I'm going to show you here are the other ways besides End Raise Forerunners, and then Infinite Tokens with the Midnight Guard and Bretagard. How to end the game. So we're going to start with a Engineered Might. So you get to choose one for 5. It's target creatures +5/+5, and you gain trample until end of turn. That's not really it. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and vigilance until end of turn. So your token swarm, there's no trample here. This is the best I could find that I had under a budget that I had left. So this will give them all +2/+2 on top of the +1/+1. So there are at least 4 4s right off the bat. And if you have enough of them, you're going to kill somebody. Same thing with Trump the Domains. So it's 6 to cast, and it has Domain. In this deck, it's not really going to matter, but it says until end of turn, creatures you control gain Trample. There's the Trample. And get +1/+1 for each basic land type among lands you control. So in this deck, you're going to have 2 at most. So they're going to get +2/+2 and Trample. And then you swarm. That's where the Trample comes in. So that's the basics of this deck. It's not horrible. I'm actually kind of excited about this deck only because I'm having a problem with the 32 color challenge, the wheel, whatever it is, the color challenge, where I'm trying to make a commander deck of my own choosing that will play, that has every color combination in the game, and I'm having a problem with the 2 color stuff. I like the 3 color decks, but the 2 colors are having a problem, and green white's one of them. And this actually may be a starting point for myself as far as a deck I'll use just for fun. Because remember, not every commander game has to be about winning, and not every commander deck has to be about winning. Sometimes it's about the camaraderie, the playing a game with your friends, or meeting new people and playing with them. So remember, not every deck has to be competitive. I hate that competitive EDH pisses me off. Just don't mind me. Alright, so let's go into some upgrades. Alright, so if you want to buy this deck and you want to upgrade it and then make it optimized, here's what you're going to do. Or at least here are some suggestions of what you should do. For the lands, obviously you want to fix the land base. So with that comes throwing in the dual land Savannah, the shock land Temple Garden, the fetch land Windswept Heath, the check land Sun Petal Grove, a pain land, brush land is the pain land for these colors. Filter land if you want for Wooded Bastion. The Battle Bond land, which is Bountiful Promenade. If you want to add the Pathway, if you're starting to get a little, into the budgetary area, you've got Branch Loft and Boulder Loft Pathway. And then the original Canopy land, which is Horizon Canopy, which is where they get their namesake from. You can go with those as to help your mana base if you want. A couple other utility lands you can go with would be Gavany Township. I believe it puts +1/+1 counters. I know it gives +1/+1. I don't remember if it's counters or not off the top of my head. Riftstone Portal is an interesting one. If you could figure out a way to get it into your graveyard, then all your lands turn into a Savannah, so it's always a nice little addition. Vitu-Ghazi, the City Tree, helps you put tokens into play if you want more tokens. Same thing with Castle Ardenvale. It'll help you put more 1/1s into play. Emiria the Skyrone will help a deck like this get some things back. So all the creatures. Now, I'm going to let you know that there's a secondary way you can play this deck. I'll tell you now and go into it in a little bit. So a lot of the creatures here are for life gain, but you can actually switch the creatures out to be creatures that create tokens, and I'll go over those in a minute. So if you put in something like a Emiria the Skyrone, those creatures come into play, you create more tokens, but I wanted to run a landfall theory and use the tokens created from the lands from Maja's ability. Let's see what else. Guy's Cradle, obviously, is, in a deck like this, it'll be infinite mana for the most part. I mean, you're going to have a shit ton of it with it. I don't suggest going out and getting a Guy's Cradle for this deck, but if you have one and you want to play this deck with it, good. Guildless Commons, another one of the bounce lands, so when it comes into play, you can return it back to your hand. So you can use the thing I showed you where you put a land into play, it'll bounce back to your hand every turn, and you can get a landfall trigger out of it. And then, alright, I hate to say this, but the penis land. And when I show you the card, because I'm going to have it up here for you, just take a look at the art and you'll see Ghost Town. It returns back to your hand so you can play it again later. It's more than a phallic symbol. It's literally a drawn stone penis. If you don't see it, maybe you need glasses. So those are the lands. Sorry to get so graphic there, but those are the lands that I would choose. Now I have a lot of ramp in here, so we're going to go over the ramp section real quick. You can still use those if you want to just do pure ramp. But if you want to make them a little bit more efficient, here are the ramp cards that you can use. You can switch out some of the ones for a Rampant Growth, a Nature's Lure, a 3 Visits, a Farseek. Here's an interesting one for you. Gift of Estates. It's a white one. And then something that's on the reserved list called Tithe, where it lets you go search for a plains, and if somebody has more lands than you, which in this deck it might not work, you can go get another plains. So you can add a Tithe in here. Far Wanderings will help you go get 2 lands. Growth Spasm, I think I actually added in here, if I'm not mistaken. I believe I did add a Growth Spasm. I did this. Yes, I did. Don't worry. Don't add that as an upgrade. That should have been in here. Kodama's Reach and Spoils of Victory will help you go get a plains if you need it from mana fixing as well. So those are all different upgraded ramp cards that you can put in here to make this deck run more efficiently. As far as creatures, I had mentioned this to you before. So the creatures can be a couple things. They can be creatures that have token creation, with landfall abilities, or with... I put a lot of the ones in here that I could of the gaining life abilities. So let's start off with an Avenger of Zendikar. Is kind of 2 things. It's a token making and a landfall ability kind of creature. Rampaging Balos. I don't have any more. I would have put it in here if I had any more. I put them in a lot of decks because they do create a lot of havoc if the deck is built for it. So it's a landfall, trigger where it puts a 4/4 into play, and with Maja out, it's a 5/5. The next 3 cards are what I've been talking about. As far as I've been testing it on Arena just to see how well it works, and man, do they work really well together. So the following 3 cards: Scoot Swarm, Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, and Ancient Green Warden can wreak havoc in a deck that can get them out and play fast, protect them, and let them get rolling. So I believe it's Ashaya. So I get the 2 mixed up, but we know Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm, if you put a land into play, it creates a 1/1 insect. But if you have 5 or more lands in play, it creates a copy of Scoot Swarm, and it just creates a fuck ton of Scoot Swarms. So Ashaya, I believe, is the one that when all your non-token creatures are also lands in addition to their other types. So when you play a non-token creature, it's a landfall trigger as well, which goes great with this commander. And then Ancient Green Warden says whenever you have a ability trigger and it was because of a land entering the battlefield, it triggers twice, and then you can play lands from your graveyard. So think about that for a second. So you can play any fetch land that you want from your graveyard, put it into play. That's a landfall trigger. Go fetch something, put another landfall trigger into play. And those triggers double because of the Ancient Green Warden. So it's a lot of stuff. Makes great deck. And then you can add a Lotus Cobra into that mix to create infinite mana, or not infinite, but a lot of mana, if you will. Then you can go a different route. You've got the Tireless Brothers. Tireless Provisioner and Tireless Tracker are great for landfall triggers. They don't say landfall, but they are landfall triggers pretty much. Then you've got the guys who create tokens when they come into play. So things like Brood Monitor, Heliod, God of the Sun is actually cool. I'm not going to go into all the creatures that can create, by the way. There's a lot of creatures that can create as they enter the battlefield, but I just wanted to mention Brood Monitor is one of the ones I would choose. Heliod, God of the Sun, is indestructible and creates tokens for every mana, how much mana you put into it. And then you got Brumaz, King of the Oreskos, which is another way to create tokens. So I'm giving you different ways to create tokens. Brumaz is one of those ones that creates tokens when you attack or block. So just different ways to create tokens. And then I mentioned it before, the Endraze Forerunners is in place of what I would put in there as a finisher is Craterhoof Behemoth. If you don't know what it is, trust me, look it up. I'm not going to put it up here because I've put it up in many other videos before, but it's a game ender. So those are some of the creatures I would go with. As far as spells defensively, you don't really want to play like too many Wrath effects in a deck like this because the whole point of this deck is to flood the board. There's an instant one that says whenever you can play it on your opponent's turn, obviously, and then for each attacking creature, you exile the creature, and then they go search for a land. Obviously, you know, it depends on how you're playing or who you're playing. That may be better than, say, a Wrath of God, but I'm going to suggest a Wrath of God just as a blanket. You've got targeted removal. I did not put any in here, but there's things like Swords to Plowshares, and then you've got a whole bunch of white cards that are targeted removal, most of them exile, that you can use. I put Disenchant in here, but there's a whole lot of other various, I guess, removal spells that are targeted as well that you can put in here. You got token makers like March of the Multitudes. It'll create a lot of tokens for you, especially, I believe it has Convoked, which means you can take every creature you've already created and create double that. Azorius Predation is actually not a bad one for this deck. Second Harvest will, if somebody for some reason is playing land destruction, or you yourself have figured out a way to put enough, like you can put a lot of things that lands that sacrifice themselves, and then play a second Harvest and bring them all back. Harmonize is a card draw card that you might want to put in here just because you need more card draw. It's the weakness of the two colors. Overrun effects, Overrun including like Overwhelming Stampede and, you know, all those cards. The last two cards I showed you are those style of cards, but I don't have a whole lot of the Overruns or Overwhelming Stampedes to put in here. I used a lot of them over the years, and, you know, you've just eventually run out. So those are a couple of the spells that you can use. Some enchants that you can use. So we're a token making deck, so obviously token doublers. So things like Doubling Season and the white version, which is Anointed Procession. Court of Grace is a good one for this deck. Depending on what way you want to go with it. Some of, you know, if you're going with the life gain, you can go one way. If you're going with the token generation, you can go one way. So it's a great, it's one of the choices you can make. Cryptolith Rite. So you're making a lot of tokens and you need to be able to keep that fuel going. Cryptolith Rite will actually make all your creatures be able to tap for mana for you. Growing Rites of Itlimak is basically the poor man's guy's cradle. So you put it into play as an enchantment. You search for, you know, the top 4 cards of your library, and you take a creature and put it in your hand, and then if you have X amount of creatures, it flips and turns into basically a guy's cradle. Land Tax is a card I don't really mention anymore other than to complain about it. I don't like it in certain decks now that I've tried it. Land Tax is great for monocolor decks, so mono white obviously. And then 2-color decks that are white included, which not a lot are, since most people don't like white in Commander. But Land Tax is great for 2-color decks because you're using a lot of basic lands. It's a deck I do like it because it lets you go grab lands, put it in your hand, and you can use it for the Landfall effect, and it's only 2 colors. What else we got? Sylvan Library and Abundance. That's a way to draw cards. If you don't know what that combo together, those 2 cards do, message me and I'll explain it. You got Anthem effects like Glorious Anthem. You've got Morari's Wake, which is a great one. Sandworm Convergence isn't one that I talk about very often. It creates tokens and it does really wonderful things for you because it stops other people's flying creatures from attacking you. I don't mention it often just because it's very expensive, like not monetarily but mana-wise to play, so some decks don't really benefit from that, but this one would. Smothering Tithe has always got to be mentioned in a white deck. Aura Shards to help you handle stuff on the board and get rid of them. Cathar's Crusade is basically a Gold Knight commander on a stick, but it leaves +1/+1 counters instead of giving it to them till end of turn. And then this is where I like my win con stuff to play a little trickery. So Epic Struggle says you can win if you have 20 cards in play, or 20 creatures in play. And then Test of Endurance says you win the game if you have 50 or more life. 2 enchantments that you can use to just win the game out of nowhere for doing what the deck does. So creatures and life. That's why I'm suggesting the Test of Endurance, because of the way that this deck is built now, which is to gain a lot of life. If you change it out to be a creature one, that means that the Epic Struggle would be a better option, but it's still always an option, especially since you start with 40 life. Alright, so after that, we're going to go into some artifacts that you can use for the deck. We're not really a tribal deck, so a lot of the tribal buffers, especially in artifacts, don't work. A lot of things say choose a creature type or choose a color. Yes, because it creates 1/1 white tokens. That would work if you chose a color, if you did the choose a color ones, but not everything in this deck is white. So you want everything to benefit from it, because, you know, you don't want to waste anything. Playing a card that only works for some of the deck, really not that, I don't really suggest that. So I chose to show you guys or tell you guys the ones that I think fit specifically in this deck because of the parameters of it not being a tribal and being dual color. So the Immortal Sun gives all of your creatures +1/+1, just like Maja does. It does not discriminate. Eldrazi Monument, again, does not discriminate. You have to sacrifice a token every turn, but it still works. So those are the two. I didn't find a lot. Some protection for Maja, obviously Lightning Greaves and all of the other ones that do it. You know, Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots and anything that you can do to protect her. Or him. Is that a him or a her? I can't tell from the picture. I'm blind too, by the way. Idol of Oblivion's a good one. It's card draw. Whenever you create a token, you can tap it to draw. Or if you've created a token for the turn, you can tap it and draw a card. It also itself becomes a token creature, so if you need that too, I would only use it for drawing cards. Skull Clamp, because you're making 1/1s. If Maha's not out, that's the only time it'll work. If for some reason somebody removed Maha, and then you have the Skull Clamp out, you can actually attach it to a token that's a 1/1 to kill it, so you can draw 2 cards. Spear of Heliod actually doesn't discriminate. I forgot about that. Spear of Heliod is an artifact. It's off I believe it's an artifact enchantment. It gives all your creatures +1/+1, and then it makes your opponent pay if they attack you too. You can kill a creature they had that dealt damage to you. Crucible of the Worlds, because if you're playing a lot of things, like Crucible of the Worlds literally just lets you play lands from the graveyard. So the reason why I like that is depending on how you decided to build the deck after you've taken it from my hands. A lot of sacrificing lands can actually benefit you on landfall triggers because of Crucible of the Worlds. So, and then Chroma's Memorial gives all your creatures all these abilities that are great and blah blah blah, and you know, great for a deck that creates a lot of tokens. So now you notice a lack here. I'm going to go into the next section. That was the artifacts that you can use to add in here, and I'm sure that you guys can look up anything you want, and if not, I can help you with it later if you purchase the deck. One section I didn't actually go into, I didn't actually have any, was Planeswalkers. There weren't a lot that I could choose for this deck that would fit really, really well on a budget. But there are a couple Planeswalkers that you can choose to add in here. Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, is one you can add. Elspeth, Sun Champion, creates tokens, destroys things that are not tokens, makes things. I don't remember which one Sun Champion is. I know it creates 3 tokens, and then I forget if its ultimate is the one that gives all your stuff indestructible or removes all of your opponent's permanents. I can't remember. I will have it up here for you. And then Garruk Wildspeaker creates tokens and then is an overrun effect itself for its ultimate. So that makes this deck runs well. Again, don't have them or they don't fit the budget, but those are the Planeswalkers I would choose. So that is the basically the upgrades that I have off the top of my head that I can give you as suggestions. If you have any questions about the deck or any comments about it, if you want to take a look at something or you want to go over it, just drop me a line, send me a message, email me, what have you. So, but that is basically my video for the week. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I think that I may actually make this I might make it a different version of this. Obviously, I'm selling this one. I might make a different version for myself that'll be upgraded, and I might even make another video on it, depending on if I do it. I don't know yet. I just had surgery yesterday on my face to have some stuff removed off of it, so I haven't really gotten past the pain part yet. So I don't know if I'm making any decisions right now with some pain medication. So either way, again, that was my time. I do want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or anything, or you'd even like to purchase the deck, I will give you my contact information here. It's bluebearsgames@gmail.com, bluebearsgames on Facebook, or you can put a message in the video below. It's like all my Commander decks that I sell are $40 plus, shipping. And if you buy more than one, I give you a little discount for it. So keep that in mind if you're looking for something for somebody. Christmas time is coming up, so you might want to buy something for a friend or a loved one. I wouldn't be mad at you because last Christmas it worked out really well. I sold a lot of decks and I had to remake a lot of decks. This is one of them. So anyway, yeah, if you want to contact me, I got the contact information there. Other than that, I want to thank you for watching again. Do me the favor, liking the video helps with my analytics. It would really help support the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't. Again, aside from the 1 pack a day video, I don't really post a lot, so it won't really be that annoying in your feed. And share this out to somebody who A, might want to purchase a deck, B, might want to see a build of the deck, or C, just because you like me. Trust me, you do. I know you do, but other people need to see me. So share it out so other people can see what I do. So anyway, that's all I got for you. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your week, and I will see you all next week.